All right, it looks like everybody's back, or at least the majority of everybody is back in the main meeting session. So really hope y'all enjoyed those breakout sessions, and hopefully a lot of what you learned will tie in well with the specialist panel today. Our thought behind this was to bring in some specialists that were going to be pretty closely or directly related to the topics that we have covered. And so that way, any of the questions that you have, you may see how it relates to the programs or the work that they're doing. And then, any direct questions that you have, they would be able to answer for you, and we can just kind of have that open dialogue. So the way we set this up is our specialist panel will take 5-6 minutes or so a piece to go ahead and give an update on their programs, some of the efforts that they're working on, and then once we get through that component, we will go ahead and open it up for a question and answer. So feel free to put your questions in those chat boxes. We'll definitely be monitoring those and getting those to the right specialist. So with that, I'll go ahead and provide a quick introduction. I won't be too winded, so that way our specialists can actually introduce themselves and tell a little bit about themselves. But to start with, I'll go in alphabetical order. We have Dr. Brent Sellers, who we heard from this morning on his herbicide update. And again, he is our State Extension Weed Specialist and the Center Director at the Range Cattle Research and Education Center in Ona. Second on the panel, we will have Chris Pravat. He is our Cattle and Forage Economics State Specialized Agent, who is also located at the Range Cattle Research and Education Center down in Ona. And then we will have Dr. Marcelo Walau, who is our State Extension Forage Specialist, and he is housed there in Gainesville. And then we will also have Dr. Todd Thrift, who is our State Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, housed in Gainesville as well. So with that, I thank the four of y'all for being here this morning and taking your time out of your day to present some of the information that y'all are working on and answer some of the questions that our participants may have. So with that, we'll go ahead and get the specialist panel started, and thank y'all again. So as far as who to start first, if y'all want to go in that alphabetical order as I introduce y'all, that will be fine. Just take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you're working on. So.
All right, so I'm Brent Sellers. Like Clay said, I'm Extension Weed Specialist. I've been here for 15 years already. Time has flown by. So the projects I'm currently working on include Brunswick grass that I've talked about. Really trying to fine-tune DuraCore, how it can work for us. What I did not mention in my presentation this morning is that DuraCore will probably replace Grazenext in the short term, probably within the next year or so. And also, I spend probably the bulk of my time working on smutgrass. So I think I've been doing that for the last 15 years. We've made a little bit of headway and still learning and still looking at different management tactics that we can try to use on smutgrass. With that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm a beef cattle and forage economist at the Range Cattle REC. I'm 100% extension, so I focus a lot of my time with working with county agents, government agencies, and producers. So cattle marketing is kind of where my focus has been over the last 6 months, or really back since November. We've really seen a lot of volatility in our cattle market. So cattle marketing is really where I've spent the majority of my time, looking at market outlook in terms of feeder calf prices, slaughter at cattle animals. A lot of emphasis has been placed on box beef cutout values, just looking at the different volatility and changes that have occurred in that area, as well as beef byproducts. In terms of providing producers with resources, I like to utilize 1, 5, and 10-year price projections from USDA and FAPRI. Obviously, those price projections going to be a little different here in the short term, but I think out there when we start looking at more long term, we'll get back closer to fundamentals and get back closer to where we really think things would have been in terms of trajectory. I do a Florida Cattle Market Price Watch that's in the Cattleman's Magazine each month. Also, it's available on our own website that kind of looks at revenues that feeder calves are going to produce, potential cost of production, break-even values, and the estimated profitability of a top management operation in Florida. Right now, I'm spending a good bit of time focusing on cost in our feedlots, so we can analyze and see how we can make our cost of production in the Southeast more competitive with those costs of productions out there. The other thing I really focus on is forages. So a lot of my grant work is with alfalfa. So alfalfa in the South, tri-state grant, working with Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. You know, it's a real finicky plant. Really, it's a high-end, high management plant. Spending a lot of time on it. It can work. It's very difficult. It does require a high level of management. Love spending time talking about cool season annual forages. One of my focuses on that, and it'll be released to our agents this fall, is developing a forage management plan in terms of practical applications that we can utilize for cool season annual forages. Doing some stuff with grazing corn right now. Really sees some additional value in terms of stalker, or even trying to finish some animals with some grazing corn in the Southeast. So looking forward to learning more about those things as we move forward. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Thrift.
All right, I think I'm going out of order, but I'll go ahead and charge on. The not a lot going on here. We're trying to figure out how, if and when and how school's going to reopen in Gainesville. I do have some stuff going on in terms of the Fed Beef Challenge. This is a program that originally started with Florida cattle ranchers about 2 years ago. This will be the third year. Ranchers can sign about 10 head of steers between 550 and 750. They will need to be weaning those steers here pretty quick. About August 15th be the wean date. They'll be shipped to Quincy Cattle Company by October the 1st, and they'll go on feed October the 15th. Those cattle are fed out in a group with everyone else's cattle, and we collect carcass data on them at the end. We'll get tenderness information. It's kind of a ranch to rail type program, but instead of one calf or two calves or three calves, it's pens of 10. And so producers can submit as many pens of 10 as they'd like. Last year I had a producer submit 5 pens of 10. There's awards and prizes at the end for there. There'll be a lot of information and data fed back on the cattle as well. So that's what I've got going on in that venue. Obviously last year we did a lot of beef quality assurance training with you guys, and things have been shut down since. I'm hoping to get some more resources out there. I have in my office a set of new national handbooks for you that you can utilize, and I hope that I can send that out with some slides that will allow you all to utilize those in your program. That's about it. From, you know, one of the things I would like to know is what you need as we move into some of this, doing this virtually. Well, I've done quite a few of these. We did a short course replacement that went fairly well, but what you all need in terms of resources to do some of these things virtually.
Awesome. So my name is Marcelo Valal. I'm the Forage Extension Specialist, and I did prepare a quick PowerPoint slide here for you so you can see some nice pictures instead of my face. And let me see if it's going well here. Just somebody, Cindy or Chris, I can see you guys. Can you give me a head if it's okay or not? Awesome, appreciate it. So I'm an assistant professor. I started in agronomy about 3 years ago, but I recognize several of the names here on this list of participants, so I'm glad to see y'all back. This picture here is at the BRU, at the Beef Research Unit in Gainesville. and it's a Bahia grass project that we started this year. We're evaluating 9 potential types, Argentine types, so mature tetraploid types for future release, and some of this looks very, very promising. We're super excited. We had a delay in our research program this year. We were not able to start grazing until late May, early June actually. But those plots in the spring were already, early spring, were already greening up and looking good, different than what we would expect for Argentine Bahia grass in this region here. One thing I want to highlight is we have a new YouTube channel and a Facebook page. So there is a lot of updates. All of our projects of the forage team, I'm trying to put updates there, especially of my team, but also for my other colleagues in Mariana, Ona, and here in Gainesville. So take a look at our materials. It's pretty neat to see those videos. Brent talked about Brunswick grass, and I saw that Courtney also talked about Brunswick grass a little bit. It's a major issue, especially here in the central North Florida on those Bahia grass pastures cut for seed. I got several calls about Brunswick grass lately, so it's out there and it's affecting. And one of the main ways to deal with it is preventing it. And how you prevent, you gotta buy certified seed. You gotta buy good seeds, certified seeds, and make sure that they don't have Brunswick grass. Take a look on that seed tag, so make sure you are getting a good product. Bermuda grass is also, we have another big project with Bermuda grass. This involved Dr. Rios, my colleague, that's a breeder, forage breeder here. Actually, this picture you're seeing was a few weeks ago. It's Ms. Levy 2000, was released last year in Nona by Dr. Vendramin and his team. And this Bermuda grass is coming up here, is doing super well. It was green early in the spring. We could have cut it before that. We just could not get to the field and to the producers. So my project is, this project is financed by the Florida Cattlemen, and what we're doing here is increasing planting material so we can offer more planting material for the producers. Along with Ms. Levy 2000, there are 2 other new materials that are being evaluated, and we hope to have those released in the next few years. Those are also very promising. Also, there is a video on our YouTube or on our Facebook page, and you can take a look at the video with the updates. I just made another one today, and I'm going to put sometime this week. Stem maggot seems to be very present this year. We got a lot of bronzing, those top leaves, those top tip of the leaves dead. You see a lot of that in the Bermuda grass pastures. Another area that I've been working a lot is corn and sorghum. For those that are familiar with the corn silage field day that we have every other year in Citro, we were not able to do this year. It's a partnership with Animal Science, Agronomy and Animal Science, and the University of Georgia. So we had a virtual field day and it was very, very good. You want to take a look at the data for past trials, you can find them at the Animal Science webpage. Get the link here, and you can find a link in our Facebook page also. And you can see a video that we produced for the field day. So as I said, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can keep updated with our forage team. Thank you.
All right. So thank y'all for giving that overview of your programs and what you have going and a little bit of your backgrounds. So as I mentioned, at this point, we'll go ahead and turn it over to a question and answer panel. So for any of those of you that are participating that have any questions, please go ahead and at this time start putting those questions into the chat box. We can go ahead and monitor those and get those sent to the appropriate specialist for some answers. And again, if you ran out of time in your breakout sessions and have questions directly related to those, you can also put those in the chat box, and the agents that taught in those breakouts can respond to you directly. So at this time, we'll go ahead and start with our question and answer panel.
There's a question in the chat box on the Florida Beef Challenge. Will it be able to be conducted this year? The answer is yes. We are planning on it. I don't know what the outcome will be. We got all, during the shutdown, we managed to still get all the data from this year, all the carcasses, all the samples. We'll have those results hopefully within a month, but we plan to continue this year with the Fed Beef Challenge as well.
Dr. Sellers, it looks like you have one in the chat box that just came in. The question is, I have a few clumps of smut grass in a hayfield or pasture. What would be the best herbicide to spot spray the clumps?
All right, so you have two options really. One's a little bit more challenging maybe. So just a few clumps, I'd mix like a 1.5% solution of glyphosate and just spray that clump. And try to keep from overspraying your desirable forage as much as you can. The other option takes a little bit of calibration of your backpack sprayer. Basically what I've figured out is if you can put about 6 ounces of spray solution on a clump and you mix 3 to 4 ounces of Velpar and 25 gallons of water, you get pretty decent control of that clump and you have some selectivity that way. I've done a little bit of that. It's a little bit tricky. If you have a bunch of clumps growing together, you kind of have to hit all of those clumps that are in that same area. But if it's just a single clump, just 6 ounces of spray solution using 3 to 4 ounces of Velpar and 25 gallons of water works pretty well. I see another one, Clay, is asking the advantage of Duracor if we have to add MSO, pasture guard, etc. So that's a good question. I don't know that there truly is an advantage from Duracor compared to Grazenex. I'm guessing is the real question. I think this came to the market so quickly. I don't know if there's an increased weed spectrum for us or not. I'm just thinking about the major weeds that we deal with. I just know that it's going to have something added to it, just like Grazenex. So I'm not sure that there's an advantage from a weed species point of view.
Okay, thank you. The next one that just came in says, any recommendations on the best fall forage for a rotational management intensive grazing system? Which forages have the best grow back after grazing? Dr. Wallau, I think that one would be situated for you. And then Chris, you could probably follow up with some economics to the cool season forages.
Yeah, so fall, the transition phases are always the most complicated one, especially because normally we have a dry fall, and it's the time of the year that you don't have enough forage anymore. You already ran out of forage from your warm season perennials, and you still don't have your cool season annuals in place. So what do you do? There's two ways there are several ways to approach that. Stockpile forage is one way, but stockpile forage, normally what we're talking about is fencing off an area, normally Bermuda grass, normally limpo grass, that you can fence off during the late summer, early fall part, and let it grow and stockpile so you can graze deferred grazing, graze it later on during that fall period. Now, you need to acknowledge that your nutritive value, your quality of that forage is going to be low, but at least you have something. Other options, you can start planting some annuals mid-summer on that can take it, summer annuals that can take your grazing a little further into the fall. Now, we cannot just rely on one forage If you think about your system with several forages, several different forages and several different planting regimes and fertilization regimes and grazing regimes, then you can take those pastures, give some rest, and get them stockpile or even growing a little bit more towards the end of that summer, early fall, so you can graze that before they can enter your in your winter pasture. So winter pastures is the other option. Normally we plant them around mid-October to mid-November, and we'll only be able to graze them later in probably in January, sometimes even in February, depending on the management. If you have irrigation available and you can anticipate that planting and fertilize, if you're talking about an intensive system like that, then you can probably have your cool season forages a little earlier on in the winter and graze that. Other option is our traditional hay. So hay is a very good, it's a very good option for that transition period whenever you don't have the winter pastures ready to graze, so you don't sacrifice your winter pastures. So the grow back, there's a follow-up question on that. Which one grow back the best after grazing? It really depends on when we're looking. Normally warm, perennial warm season forages are not going to grow back fast after grazing during the later part of the summer and fall, is just because the days are growing shorter and you don't have much sunlight. Sometimes a little bit of fertilization helps, but in that situation, it's a little iffy because you don't get that much response for the fertilizer you're applying late in the season.
I'll add just a couple things. So I think in terms of fall forage grazing, just in terms of economics, if we were going to utilize something in the fall that was of high quality that we wanted to intensively graze, it would be the fourth, fifth, sixth grazing on some summer annuals. If we're talking about getting into October or early November, really want to graze out those summer annuals in early November. If we want to talk about cool season annual forages for some fall grazing, really we need to be looking for either sacrificing some perennial pasture, making it, temporary cropland on our own place where you can plant really early. You're not going to get fall grazing, adequate fall grazing on perennial pasture. That's going to be winter grazing. You're going to get onto it in December, early January. You can't fight a perennial pasture and think that you're going to get some good fall grazing. So my recommendation would be utilize, a late grazing of summer annuals, or get on some cropland and try to go in with some annual ryegrass, some triticale, some oats, some cereal rye, something that has a little bit of heat tolerance, and try to get in. And Marcelo mentioned irrigation. It's going to basically be a requirement to get that early grazing on some cropland. So, I think I would look around, see who's planting some corn silage, harvesting some corn off that you can come in right behind them, be able to rent that ground. You plant early, you're probably going to have to pull off early as well, because they're going to want to go in early March and plant again. But it would potentially provide some good grazing. And then I think just utilizing what's there in terms of that perennial pasture, utilizing the Bahia grass or Bermuda grass that you have in your pasture. It's not going to regrow very well. The regrowth is just going to be marginal. In terms of nitrogen use efficiency, it'll be about the worst of the entire year if we look at fertilizing in October or even November. I think that would be something we would typically want to stay away from. But just a couple comments there on the fall forage systems. I know it's a crunch time for us a lot of times when we talk about extending that fall forage season. So I've also I got a question sent privately, so I'll go ahead and answer it. It was talking a little bit about the market outlook for marketing feeder calves now through October, and thinking about adding additional weight gain, selling a little bit bigger calf, what trend might we be typically seeing. Obviously everything's up in the air with potentially the impacts of COVID-19 have had on meat processing and just consumer demand as well. So talk a little bit about those factors and kind of how that will factor into marketing feeder calves. Whenever we look back at, a 2-year average, look back at 2019 prices, feeder calf prices are actually, they're in the driver's seat compared to all the variables that have really occurred today. There were solid prices on solid prices for feeder calves, 400 to 5 to 6. They're solid in there. So I think right now, great time for us to potentially look at marketing whenever we can consider the additional variables and struggles that are in the marketplace today compared to 1 year ago. This is still before a year ago. This is still before the plant fire there in Kansas last year. But, so we're still in a really good marketing time period right now. What's our seasonal pattern? Obviously is a late spring high, slight decline into the midsummer. And then we really start seeing a significant decline from August through the first week of November there in terms of feeder calf prices. So it's very difficult to really add additional weight gain from now through the fall months. It would be a situation where we would want to go ahead and pre-market if we had the size and the volume to be able to go ahead and market those animals on a internet sale or a board sale. I'll turn it back over to Brent to answer the question on Tifton 44.
All right, so I think this question about globe sedge and Tifton 44, and if I remember right, I don't deal with a lot of globe sedge in this part of the state, but if I remember correctly, this is one that Outrider kind of struggles with. And I don't know what rate people are using on that. I generally recommend an ounce per acre of Outrider. This may be a case where we need to go the maximum rate, and that's 2 ounces per acre, but we're getting pretty expensive then. There is another product called Sandia. There's a generic out of that one as well. It's a different active, but in the same chemical family. It's just not as broad spectrum, I don't feel, as the Outrider is. So it may be that we just have to try a higher rate of the Outrider and see if we can knock it out that way. And it's back to you, Chris and Todd.
There's a question about beef processing and supply chain recovery from COVID setbacks. Most of what I have been reading would suggest that they are back to normal in terms of their kill capacity or plant capacity. We still have a backlog of fat cattle, but the people I've been talking to would suggest that they're working through those pretty fast. Carcass weights are up. We're bumping right at 900 pounds, which is really high. Quality grade is way up. The biggest problem is where the demand's coming from. Most of it is still retail demand, much less restaurant demand. So some of the middle meats and things like that are lagging behind. But I think we're back up to speed at the processing plant level. I think there's just going to be some profit taking, if that's what you want to call it. Them trying to get back some of the equity they lost and some of the short-term volatility that existed there. The Packer's been pretty profitable through this whole deal. It's been a matter, and at one time, $500 to $600 a head profitable. And I think it's back to more normal levels now, maybe a $200 a head profitable. And I think it'll probably stay there. They're still in the driver's seat right now, so they can still keep fat cattle at around $1. Unfortunately, That's probably pressuring our feeder cattle a little lower in terms of real prices, and our calves even lower. Some of the real problems have to do with calf type right now, but Chris, I'll let you weigh in on that. Whatever you want to say on it, but I think the Packers still in the driving seat at this point.
Absolutely. So basically, a lot of what Todd said is the same thing I'm seeing. Just in terms of box beef prices, talk about how they're in the driver's seat. It went from I've got the data pulled up right in front of me. So I mean, it went from late March where they were at 207 on all the way up to $459 per hundredweight for choice box beef. Right now they're at $200 a hundredweight again. So you're below 5-year average. You're below 2019. The only reason they're able to maintain those margins is because they've been able to push slaughter cattle below $1. So they're still got some margins out there, but in terms of box beef cutout value, significant declines in margins. Currently, we're at the lowest level throughout 2019 or 2020 in terms of those in-product margins. Obviously, in terms of the processing side of things, they're back at year-ago levels. You've only had 2 points since the first week of April where you're above 2019 levels, and those were only by 10,000 head. The real, scenario is we still really, and we never will, but we still really don't know how many cattle are out there. That's that guessing game. How far are we backed up? Are we still backed up 500,000 head? We don't know. That's a situation where Todd talked a little bit about, cattle dress weights in terms of what the carcass weights are when we're getting harvested. Significant higher. They're very heavy coming out of the feed yard. So there's a lot of supply out there, meat proteins. A couple things to think about in terms of, it's so significant that these calf prices have been able to really hold right now because you've got, food service in terms of restaurants, whether it be fast food or high-end restaurants. You're down about 35% year to date in terms of sales. In terms of revenue sales, you're down 35%. Grocery stores are only up like 12%. So just in terms of meat proteins in general, in terms of just food in general, we're selling a lower value product overall. Consumers are still eating the same amount of product, but they're paying less for food than they paid in previous years, which is very detrimental. We want to capture as much in terms of dollars of their income. So that's really not looking good for us on the demand side of things. Getting these high-end restaurants is very key in order to obtain as much value for that fed steer as possible. You think a little bit about the civil, the protests and things, where they typically occurring in downtown areas where those high-end restaurants are. So not only have they been affected by COVID-19, but also the civil unrest and protests also limit some of the eating at those high-end restaurants now that they may be open back at 25 or 50% capacity. Just a couple thoughts there. Thank you.
So I think I have a revisit of the question. Gray said that he didn't clarifying the question that he asked before. Do any winter forages, rye, oat, triticale, wheat work better on management intensive grazing system? And do any of those grow back after initial grazing? The answer is yes. Everything grows back after initial grazing, but there is a big but there. If your management intensive grazing relays on a long regrowth period where those plants are getting to the boot stage, they're putting shoots, they're putting fluorescence out and putting seeds there, and you graze them to the ground, nothing is going to grow back. You need to back off, anticipate that grazing before those species, any of those forages set seed, And do not graze them down to the ground. Leave at least 4 inches. I like even more, 6 inches of stubble height for those small grains, rye oat, triticale, and a little bit less for ryegrass if you want, but respect that stubble height. Do not graze it close. You need leaf area after grazing so those plants can regrow. What other thing also affects it is fertilization. If you have limited nitrogen, those plants are they have a very great potential. They can grow a lot. They can produce a lot of forage if you supply them with the resources, and resources especially meaning water early on and nitrogen. From those that you mentioned, the only thing I'll keep shy from is wheat. Wheat in our region here, especially in central North Florida, it does not have a great potential. It's prone to diseases, and even the double purpose wheats, they do not give a good grazing and they do not give a good grain crop. So I really like oat, triticale, and rye, and then mix some of those with ryegrass that you can extend the grazing season. So you have the small grains, rye, oat, triticale coming before January, February, March, and they start to decline, and then in March your ryegrass is picking up, and you can graze that ryegrass into April and even into May, depending on the conditions and depending on your objectives. As Chris mentioned before, if you have a prepared land, if you're not just overseeding over perennial pastures, then you can get much greater potential on those cold season annuals. But if you're overseeding them, you also don't want a very, very long season. You need to cut that ryegrass back early, mid-April, early May maximum, so you can give the chance for that warm season perennial, that's the base of your system, to come back. So short answer, yes, all of those will regrow well. It really depends on your grazing management. If you're waiting too long and you're grazing to the ground, then you're killing your pasture.
Dr. Thrift, I just had a question come in privately, and the question is, where are we on cattle tagging system that the Florida cattlemen were promoting?
Okay, so there's 2 or 3 pilot projects going on right now relating to the tagging. Not a lot has changed as far as the regulations go, and I think as long as we're dealing with COVID and a lot of other things, it's not going to be at the forefront. So I don't think you have to go out and tell your producers, hey, you got to be doing this right now. One of the things they're doing is testing a couple of, there's some new type tags out there. There's some high frequency and low frequency tags. So they're testing the durability of those tags. They're testing the retention of those tags. And they're also probably the most exciting thing. And I think nationally, one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to move, well, they tell me we're going to move towards high frequency tags. They have a little better read range. You can read groups of animals, some of those kinds of things. And I'm not up on that as much as I probably should be. The thing that's very interesting in what may happen in the short term is the high frequency tags. They're also putting those in a back tag on cows and doing some testing. Like at the livestock market, you take cows to the market, they put the traditional glue-on back tags there. Those are very, very, very inexpensive. They cost a nickel or less, probably less. Well, they've got one that's a back tag that's also fairly inexpensive that has a reader in it. Apparently, it's a lot like the reader you would have on your number if you ran a marathon. I obviously don't run anywhere unless it's to the dinner table, but it's a very inexpensive tag that they put on like the back tag, and I think maybe the sale barns will have a lot of interest in that because it looks like their normal system and it works through their normal system, at least to some degree. Right now, the Arcadia market and the Ocala market are doing some field tests with it. There's also stuff going on in Texas, Kansas. I don't think anything's changing in the short term. I don't think you're going to see a bunch of new regulations. I think it's just a matter of time. It may be, though, that the back tags, the high frequency back tags, may provide an alternative for a lot of producers that don't have chutes, don't have the ability to tag cattle very easily before they go to the market. They can slap those tags on them and be in compliance. Now, that still doesn't mean that you're not going to have to do something, particularly if you're buying cows at the market. You're going to be responsible for probably submitting some information and doing some stuff like that. But right now, nothing's a law. No different than it was when we had the training a year ago. You know, we're moving that direction, but that's what I'd tell you right now.
Clay, can I go ahead and answer? Courtney had a question here. What oat variety recommendation for planting in Bahia grass over Bahia grass like a Tifton 9? So in terms of oat, first of all, you need to drill that into the Bahia grass pasture. Second, when you do that, you need to remove competition, and you can remove competition by grazing it closely, by mowing it closely, or by a small rate of a herbicide, like a reduced rate of glyphosate, for example, that can knock that Bahia grass back so it won't compete. We always talk about overseeding and just no-tilling cold season forages into Bahia grass and Bermuda grass, but winters like last winter that was very hot until late December, those warm season grasses were still growing a little bit, not much to be a good source of grazing, but sufficient to hold that cool season plan that we planted there. So we had some very unsuccessful examples of that happening in our trials last year because of warm winter. So to respond directly, what variety? Normally, what I recommend are our something like a Legend 567 or a Ram or an Horizon, and y'all can have access here. The link I posted has a complete list of recommended cool season varieties for Florida. What I'm looking for there, especially talking about oats, is disease resistance. That's what I want, something that's rust resistant and that can perform well. And there is a huge differences in between the common oat, just the feed oat or any other common oat versus some of the improved varieties in disease resistance. So that's what I'm looking for.
All right. Chris, I got one for you in regards to electric fencing. I know you have some data on the economics of electric fencing and the use for a grazing management system. So can you touch base a little bit on the pros and the cons of those types of systems whenever we're trying to utilize it for grazing management?
I gotcha. So in terms of utilizing electric fence for grazing management, I think it can really go back to the question that was proposed earlier in terms of utilizing it on winter forages with an intensive grazing management system, being able to manage that residue height, as Marcelo talked about. You know, if we were taking forage a little bit too low, not leaving enough root space back, I think that's one of the ways that electric fencing can really pay. Moving cattle very easily, you know, is a you know, I can put cattle just about anywhere with electric fence. Just you know, give me 3 days to break them to it, and we'll be good for the rest of their lifetime. So you know, there's got a lot of pros to it. To me, it's very cheap. You know, I can build a high tensile wire fence that will electrify for just a portion of the cost that it would take for barbed wire or for a net wire fence. So it's significantly cheaper. It takes some time to learn electric fencing. There's going to be a learning curve to it. It's not something we want. I would definitely recommend playing with the temporary wire before we started going with some permanent high tensile wire, just because there's the learning curve, and you really don't want to get high tensile wire around metal T-posts, things like that, other bob wire that can lock onto your high tensile wire. Some of the cons, you're gonna get hit with the wire significantly. I mean, you're gonna it takes a learning curve. You're gonna get hit. There's an electric bill with it. It's not much. It may be like, it may be like $9 a month by running your electric fence. So small con there, but being able to just move your cattle wherever you need to move them, not having all those additional interior fences, just being able to set them up and move it. I think that gives it a significant pro in terms of temporary electric fencing or even with high tensile.
All right, thank you. Dr. Thrift, I had another one that came in here privately, and the question is, how is the small ruminant program going at Animal Sciences?
How come I get that one? I don't know. That would be that would really be probably something to ask Dr. Arlington. We do have some people working in this area. We actually they've got some of the Florida natives out back, and they're doing some stuff with them. And I've been told there's some goat stuff going on as well. We have a faculty member doing some nutrition work in that area, but I really don't know. There's been talk of a faculty member in that arena more so, but to the best of my knowledge, everything's on hold right now. So I would say that's not probably high at the priority list.
So if I could jump in on that one, just to complement, there is, I believe there is a new faculty on vet school that's for small ruminants, correct? We recently, I don't know what's the status of the program per se right now, but we recently got approved a project with several people from InFlag group also, to look into two aspects of the small ruminants. First one, the market, production and market. So those that are interested, please keep an eye on what we're doing, because we'll need your help to assess market and production capacity. And the second part of it is going to be the RAM test, re-implementing nutritional and genetics tests at the Animal Science there with some colleagues. That will come hopefully starting maybe late fall or early next year.
Thank you. So at this time, it looks like we have about 8 to 10 minutes left. So for anyone that has any last minute questions, please get those in. We have time for a couple more questions. On behalf of the committee and InFlag, we would also ask if you could enter in the chat just where you're coming from, so that way we kind of have an idea of where we were able to reach with this program. So state, city, anything like that would be helpful information. So but like I mentioned, we have at this time about 8 minutes left, so please feel free to enter in any last minute questions that you have. And
Isabella, do you want to expand on what you wrote on the chat about the small ruminant website?
Yes. So I have been working in collaboration with Dr. Catalina in the vet school, and also Dr. Valles and some other people at the Animal Science Department on producing some material, and I am launching a small ruminant website into the Animal Science Department website for extension. So this is going to have any type of material from different topics related to small ruminants, where small ruminant producers can find whatever they need in order to improve their operations. So it's going to be based on the latest research about small ruminants. So this is coming up soon, probably next week. We're gonna have the first articles posted on the new website.
Dr. Sellers, I'm going to kind of take a shot in the dark here on this question and see what kind of response you have, but I'm actually answering a private message right now into fencing repair following Hurricane Michael. And I know when all that was going on, one of the biggest challenges that was being discussed was just, debris removal. So could you touch on, some possible herbicide protocol or just management for maintaining those perimeter fence lines and, so whenever we do face those hurricane situations, we can minimize, damage.
Sure. Depending on what you want to do, if you want total vegetation control around those perimeter fences and still pick up woody species, which a lot of them have woody species coming up in them, I typically use a 3% glyphosate and a 0.5 to 1% remedy or triclopyr solution. You can swap out remedy for pasture guard and use the same 0.5% to 1%. I really like those mixes. I think they're pretty broad spectrum and it's pretty good. So if you don't want to kill grass that's in the fence, then you just use either remedy or pasture guard. And I would probably stick with the remedy. Again, 0.5 to 1% solution, 1% for bigger stuff. Now, if you have stuff that's taller than 6 feet tall, don't expect the remedy to work unless you're covering the entire plant. So I'll just keep that in mind. Okay, I got two more. I'll just stay on. Okay, so I'm going to touch on the last one that just came in because I just talked about remedy. So with the remedy on fence lines, if it's just a foliar application, I just dilute it in water as normal. If you're doing basal bark or cut stump or something like that, it's a little bit different. Just depends on what you're doing. I got a question about cover grass. Seems to be spreading in small patches and Bahia grass. Recommendation for control. So you have two options. Without any desirable trees, especially oaks, you can use Arsenal or Mazapir at 0.5 to 1%, or glyphosate at 3%. And with glyphosate, I go back every 6 months and retreat as needed. And Mazapir, go back every 12 months and retreat as needed. I get a lot of questions about mixing those two together, glyphosate and Mazapir together. The Mazapir helps glyphosate. Glyphosate does not help a Mazapir, put it that way, on Kogan grass. The last question I see for me is Brunswick grass and Bermuda grass with glyphosate or any other herbicides. So that's something we're actually working on right now. I'm hoping that we'll see some activity with Escort at the high use rate. I was actually talking to a gentleman this morning right before this virtual field day, and he has actually tried that at 1 ounce, and it barely did anything to the Brunswick grass. So I'm hoping that increasing that to 1.5 ounces or split applications, we might be able to get some more activity with Escort on Brunswick grass and Bermuda grass. So I'll stop there.
Well, it looks like we're now at 10:58. So I appreciate everyone on the specialist panel for taking time to be with us today. Appreciate your insight and outlook, especially during the times that we're in for the beef cattle standpoint and all the information that's been shared today. For those of you that are participating with us, hopefully, you'll be able to take some of this information that you learned today and apply it to your own operations and for your own benefits. So as I mentioned, we have recorded this whole session. Each of the breakouts have been recorded, and all of those will be uploaded after today. We'll start working on that this afternoon on getting those put up on the Google site. And once that is completed, we will go ahead and send that link out. So anything that you may have missed or any information that you wanted to participate in, you will be able to do so. And then we'll also be sending a survey with that. So please, take the time to look over that survey, fill it out. Your feedback is going to be important to us. That feedback will help us for future planning and implementation of programs to help each and everyone that's here today. So again, thank you. Appreciate your attendance and appreciate all of the specialists being with us today and for your time. So with that, Luke, do you have any concluding thoughts?
I kind of just want to, on top of what Clay said, just thank everyone for participating today. Also want to thank all the agents who are involved in this group. We've got about 13 different county agents who kind of put this thing together. Each year, normally we hold it in person. This year has definitely been a switch to be able to put this on kind of a virtual platform. And I think it definitely shows that they did a great job at this. And again, thank you for all the specialists who are involved. And again, thank you all for the participants for coming. Any other following questions? I think we're pretty much done, Clay.
That sounds good. I think we're in good shape. Hopefully everybody, found this program to be beneficial. And like I said, we'll be looking forward to your feedback and planning the Livestock and Forages Field Day for next year. So again, thank you. And thank you everyone that has participated and all your efforts that went into being able to pull this off. As Luke said, this is definitely not our traditional platform and has been a, major learning curve for us. So thank you for sticking with us and helping us pull this off. And